This Day in Esoteric Political History is brought to you by Progressive. Are you thinking about how to tighten up your budget these days? We all are. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average, and customers can qualify for an average of 6 discounts when they sign up. A little off your rate each month goes a long way. Get a quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed in 2020. Potential savings will vary, discounts vary, and are not available in all states and situations. Imagine you're shipwrecked off the coast of Northwest Africa. You find yourself at the edge of the Sahara Desert, one of the most uninhabitable places on Earth. With dwindling supplies, you need to cross hundreds of miles to reach civilization. The all-new season of Against the Odds from Wondery tells the true story of Captain James Riley and his crew who survived a harrowing ordeal in their fight to get out of the desert. Listen to the podcast Against the Odds, Shipwreck on the Sahara on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or you can listen 1 week early and ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app. Wondery, feel the story. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, March 25th, 1933. Listeners, do you know that meme of that picture of a cat sitting at a table reading a newspaper and then it's got this thought bubble and it's saying, I should buy a boat? Does anyone know that meme? Well, that's basically President Roosevelt on this day in 1933. He is that cat, and he wants to buy a boat because this was the day, March 25th, that the USS Sequoia was officially commissioned as a presidential yacht. And then for the next 44 years or so, it served as a floating venue for 8 presidents. And I don't want to spoil too much about the history of presidential yachts, but like seemingly most yachts, these boats were a combination of really cool toys, total money pits, venues for some sketchy goings-ons, just like classic boat stuff. And so here to discuss not just the Sequoia, but the history of presidential boats are, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Columbia and Kelly Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
This one's really fun. There are a ton of interesting boats and presidents tidbits that we're going to go through. But, Nikki, you want to start with the Sequoia itself and its history as a boat and what exactly happens here at the beginning of Roosevelt's term?
Yeah, I'm a boat historian today. So there had been a presidential yacht called the Mayflower, of course. But because it cost a ton of money to operate and because President Herbert Hoover wanted to present himself as a fiscally responsible president, he got rid of that boat. Here comes, in its absence, the Sequoia. The Sequoia was bought by the Commerce Department at the beginning of the Depression. So an oil executive, William Dunning, had lost his entire fortune, needed to offload some of his toys, and so he offloads his yacht to the Commerce Department, who uses it for like sting operations in order to catch rum runners, which is a kind of amazing use of this yacht. They would invite...
It's like a honeypot,
yes,
right?
Yes.
It's a boat honeypot.
A honey whiskey pot. Where they would
So the rum runners thought that they were entering a rich person's yacht where they could find clients to sell illegal booze to, and instead it was the feds.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And when they weren't busting up these rum runner rings, Herbert Hoover, who now was sad that he didn't have a boat because he sold the old one, is using it for like fishing trips. He's sailing it down to Florida to visit his mom. He really likes this yacht. He even puts it on the White House Christmas card in 1932, which a little tin-eared when the entire economy has collapsed and you're like, check out my yacht.
I'm on
That's
a boat.
An amazing detail. Yeah, exactly. In the middle of the Depression, he puts a yacht on his Christmas card.
Oh,
it's
man.
unreal. So then in 33, which is this date we're looking at, Roosevelt is now a new president, and it gets decommissioned as a military vessel and get formally commissioned as the president's playpen. So then, Kelly, what do we need to know? Well, let's go through some other sort of interesting tidbits in this boat's history and presidential boats' histories.
Some people think that it was actually not named the Sequoia like the tree, but Sequoia after the Cherokee Native American leader. So in 1936, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt takes up the ship, but he's not a fan of it, primarily because the boat is made of wood, and he, as a child, witnessed his aunt burning alive from an oil lamp accident, and so he's not too keen about taking it on. He chooses his own boat, a 318-foot yacht called the USS Potomac, and instead they have an elevator installed on it for him. He sort of pimps it out to his own desire, but it's interesting that he chooses to have his own boat instead of the Sequoia.
Yeah, but the Sequoia comes back. Truman is a huge fan of it. He's like tickling the ivories on it. They use it as a kind of floating Camp David. But I actually kind of love how Eisenhower uses the boat. He sees it as kind of a tactical tool. So there's this point early in his presidency where he just puts all of his chiefs of staff on the boat and is like, I need you to figure out a policy for me. You're not getting off of this boat until you come to a consensus, which is how you get a document known as the Sequoia Report that helps to kind of lay out the defensive strategy of the early Eisenhower administration. But I love that he is basically locking them in a room in the form of a boat that he's not letting them off of.
Settle it, pretty much, is what he's saying. I think that what happens after that's pretty interesting, too. In October of 1962, now Kennedy is president, and he, too, is holding meetings on the yacht, and he's even discussing the Cuban Missile Crisis on the yacht. But he also celebrates his last birthday on board. And curiously, after his assassination, they basically give an order to destroy all of the personal logs associated with the Sequoia during the Kennedy administration. So not going to say what happened on the boat, but obviously something they didn't want people finding out about.
Well, I think we can guess or we can infer, rich people like to do certain things on boats, and Kennedy has a certain reputation, and we'll leave it there. But this gets at something that I think is an emerging theme, which is the boat is almost a representation, reverse Rorschach test or whatever you want to call it, for the personalities of these presidents. And so, Eisenhower is very stern and wants to just have meetings and get people done. Kennedy likes to party a little bit, so he uses the boat in that regard. Truman likes to just escape. But it is this really interesting phenomenon of how you can kind of really see their personalities through how they use the boats.
I mean, I've got a good data point for you on this one, Jody, and that's what Nixon does with the boat, which is he has them install a shield around the boat so that none of his conversations that he has on board can be bugged. Which feels very Nixon.
Very Nixonian. That's amazing, and I love the notion that. Well, how do you install a shield around the boat? What is the seaworthiness of that? I'm very, very curious about how you do that. But yes.
So in sum, business and pleasure is pretty much conducted on this ship. And it's interesting. You know what they say about boats? They say the best thing about it is the day you buy it and the day you sell it. So Jimmy Carter acquires the ship or the yacht in 1977, and as a form of a symbolic cutback, he decommissions the yacht, and it fetches about $270,000 at auction, which taxpayers are paying annually about $800,000 a year to maintain this ship. So in some ways, it's a cost-saving measure for sure. But Carter later recalls that selling the yacht was probably a mistake. Carter says, listen, people thought I was not being reverent enough to the office that I was holding, that I was too much of a peanut farmer, not enough of an aristocrat, or something like that. So I think that it shows that the American people want something of an element of, or the image of, a monarchy in the White House. And I agree with that to some extent. I do think that there's something about the glitz and glam and looking at your presidential leader as someone who has acquired certain things or has use of certain things. I think people want to see that a little bit.
That's interesting.
They kind of want a monarch. And it's such an interesting contrast with the Reagan administration, right? The Reagan administration is known for its mink coats and tuxedos and the splash that comes with the 1980s, which is kind of the decade of the yacht. It's the yuppie decade. And so actually what happens with this boat is that a private organization buys it. They call themselves the Presidential Yacht Trust, and they sort of like lend it back to the president. And so like Reagan still makes use of the Sequoia as his yacht. There's actually this kind of amazing story. So his EPA administrator, whose name was Ann Gorsuch Burford, who that name should sound familiar. She was the mother of future Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, was on the yacht when she was hatching this plan to withhold federal funds for toxic cleanup to California in order to hurt the Senate campaign of Jerry Brown, who was running for Senate in California at the time. She actually becomes the first agency director in U.S. history to be cited for contempt of Congress. And it all took place on the presidential yacht.
Sequoia.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So, okay. Well, Neil Gorsuch's mom, I think, is definitely a future episode here. That's a fascinating tidbit. I do want to go back to this Presidential Yacht Trust, which is the nonprofit organization that acquires the Sequoia for $1 million in 1980. I just love the notion of like, some people are like, oh yeah, I work for a nonprofit, and they're like Doctors Without Borders or some other thing. And then this person's like, yeah, I run a nonprofit. It's called the Presidential Yacht Trust. So not all nonprofits are created equal. Let's just leave it at that. So is this boat still floating around? What do we know about this thing?
Well, if you want to throw a party for $10,000, you too can party for 4 hours on the Sequoia. I mean, I think it's crazy that right now, as in 2005, you could rent it and have like a party boat pretty much and sail around wherever you wanted to go.
Yeah.
But we should say that it's pretty run down. Like, this is a wooden boat that has been sailing around for a long time. It apparently had a raccoon infestation, something it shares in common with the White House. But according to, and I am not making this up, the Super Yacht Times, it was set for restoration in 2019. So hopefully it has spent the pandemic being lovingly restored, so American presidents can once again sail in a big wooden boat down the Potomac.
Yeah. And look, it's important to support independent media. And so, don't read Super Yacht Times online for free. You should subscribe. You should support it. That's an actual publication.
It is. And you're right. We should support independent journalists. Yeah. Independently wealthy journalists, probably.
Yeah, I would say so. Okay. That brings us to the end of the saga of the USS Sequoia. That was very fun. Kelly Carter Jackson, thanks to you as always.
My pleasure.
And Nicole Hammer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. We were making jokes about supporting media, but that actually is a big part of how we make this show. So if you want to support us directly, there is a link on our website, thisdaypod.com, where you can give a direct donation to support Radiotopia, or you can become a monthly member, or you can become a monthly member. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. Kala Nakua helps with our transcripts, which you can also find on our website, thisdaypod.com. You can also email us with any questions or comments or suggestions for topics, thisdaypod@gmail.com. My name is Jody Avirgan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Radiotopia from